For more on the Ohio State basketball team, let's bring in the man who covers them every day for the Columbus Dispatch, Adam Jardy. So, Adam, we were riding that high, all those wins, and now back-to-back losses. How worried are you after two losses to the state up north?
A little. I think it's fair to have a little bit of trepidation about maybe where this team is at this moment because it has been a rough week for them. But you have to. I think if you are looking for the positive signs, I mean, you just played a team that is universally regarded as a number one seed, maybe the best team in the country, and played them right till the end in Michigan. And then, I mean, you go to Michigan State and you play without a Kyle Young. A lot of strange things happen in that game. I mean, you can make the case that teams lose games and okay, they lost a game, but yeah, when you stack two losses in a row as you head into March, it can be a little concerning.
Okay, I'll start right there with Kyle Young. You mentioned his name. Is there any doubt at this point how important he is? I mean, I know we look at the numbers and you say, oh, 7 points, 5 rebounds. Who cares? But he really is a very important piece.
Yeah, and it was fascinating watching that Michigan State game unfold without him because that was a game that their offense just wasn't on the level that it normally is. And Kyle's not the guy that the offense goes through, but he's that guy that gets you some extra possessions. He'll extend a possession. He'll keep something alive. He'll make a play. And when you lose by 4 points in a game that, comes down to the wire like that, you really could have used an impact like what Kyle Young would give you. And so I think it's just another example of just how crucial he is to this team's success. I had someone say, he's not the steering wheel and he's not the engine, but he's like the ball bearings. He makes it all work.
I know you know Chris Holtmann as well as anyone in the media. Were you surprised to see him get 2 technicals and ejected? I know there are a lot of calls that Buckeye fans would argue against. Sometimes we watch through our scarlet goggles, but for sure there were some iffy calls there. So what do you make of that ejection?
Yeah, that was pretty wild. I mean, he's the first Ohio State coach to be ejected since Jim O'Brien back in 2003. So this isn't something that happens very often. And when you know Chris Holtmann, I mean, he's a pretty mild-mannered dude. So clearly he was pretty fired up in that game. It is interesting. One of the officials reffed the Penn State game at home 2-3 weeks ago and was not very cordial toward Chris Holtmann, was glaring at him a lot. So I think there might have been, maybe a little bit of a history there. But he was agitated from my viewpoint in the Breslin Center. Chris Holtmann was agitated from shortly after that game started. Just I don't know if it was the way the game was being officiated or what, but he was pretty fired up as that game unfolded. And then there were some bad calls on both ends. I will be the first to admit that, but it definitely seemed to impact Ohio State to a more significant degree.
If you're one of the guys who didn't watch the game and just read the box score the next day, you would say EJ Liddell had a pretty good game, 18 points, but most of that from the line. He was just 4 of 13 from the field. So what did Sparty do to frustrate him?
They run the way that they've decided to play this season. They basically play 4 out and 1 in, but they just rotate like 4 dudes into the post. And they don't care how many fouls they pick up. None of them is particularly more skilled or really doesn't do a whole lot more than the next guy. And so they can just keep bringing big guys in, and they don't care how many times they foul you. And it affected EJ. When I spoke to him after the game, he said that the officials didn't cost us the game. Like I just needed to be better with the physicality. I needed to finish my opportunities. I think it does tell you something, though. I mean, he was, like you said, 4 of 13. He only took 1 3. So he's 4 of 12 from 2, and normally he's a pretty high percentage shooter from that close range. So clearly the physicality affected him, and I think maybe not having a Kyle Young again, to take some of that pressure off and to maybe spread out a defense a little bit. I think that probably played a role as well.
These losses were very similar in more than they were just to teams from Michigan. Both games they could have won, but they sputtered down the stretch. And before the season, Adam, we talked about a well-balanced team and the benefits of that, but also the negatives. And I know it goes a bit cliche at times, but when you lose close games down the stretch, it makes you wonder, do they have the guy to go to? Is it Dwayne? Is it EJ? Are you concerned at all at them not closing these games?
I'm not, because I think these games were very different style of games, and I think you just have to go back, just shortly before these games and go to the game at Penn State, go to playing Indiana at home. I mean, you go back to some of these more recent wins, and they did close out these teams down the stretch. And so I don't think it's suddenly a case of, they've forgotten how to do these kinds of things. I just think in this case, Dwayne had a tying layup with 1.6 seconds left. He gets clobbered, and they don't call a foul, and you lose. That happens sometimes. But I think this team, they still are poised. They're still confident. Just 2 tough losses that you stack one on top of the other like that.
Okay, let's look to the future. On the positive side, you still have 2 games left in the regular season to make things right. But on the negative side, they're both top 10 teams, Illinois and Iowa. So are you confident they can bounce back against these two clubs?
Well, I'm confident they'll play hard, and I'm confident that they believe that they can bounce back. I mean, I think that's as much of the battle as anything. These, like you said, these are two top 10 teams. These are two of the best in the Big Ten, but these are also teams Ohio State has had success against this season. They went to Illinois and won. They went to Iowa and won. I mean, until the Michigan game, that Iowa game was the best game I'd seen in some time. And it is interesting. I mean, Iowa's dealing with some injuries. They had like Jack Nungy's out. He injured his knee. He's an important piece for them. They had a couple other guys banged up. They were playing Thursday night. Both those teams will be desperate for a win. But I do think that Ohio State has every bit of confidence in itself that, this 2-game losing streak doesn't become 3 or doesn't become 4.
Okay, let's talk about the potential outcomes here as far as NCAA tournament seeds. I still firmly believe if Ohio State wins out, and that includes the Big Ten championship, they're a 1 seed. I think if you win the Big Ten, no question. So what is the peak? I think you'll agree with me on the 1 seed is still in play if they win out. How low could they go? 3, 4, 5? What do you think?
I don't know if I foresee them falling any further than a 2 at this point, because I think they're still pretty firmly cemented as a 1 seed. I mean, you look at their quad 1 wins and you look at their overall resume. I mean, there's not a better resume out there right now. I mean, the only thing working against them is they do have a few too many losses, but you look at who they play going forward. I mean, you're not really going to get dinged very much for losing to Iowa or losing to Illinois or whoever might knock them out in the Big Ten tournament. So, I mean, I think if Ohio State holds serve here and, say they split these last 2 games, and even honestly, if they lose in the first game of the Big Ten tournament, it's going to be against a quality team. It's hard for me to foresee a scenario where they fall anywhere further than a 2.
Wow, okay, that's very interesting. So you think they'll be a 1 seed or a 2 seed. Do you think they can make a run to the Final Four? Do you see enough? Are you shaken at all by what you've seen over the last 7 days? Do you still think it's a Final Four caliber team?
I think it is still a Final Four caliber team. I think they're better served if they're a 1 seed and they don't have to play a Gonzaga or a Baylor or frankly a Michigan, before they would get to a Final Four. But the thing that still concerns me about this team is going back to that Michigan game. They have to get better at just stopping other teams. And that was a game that was the best offensive efficiency performance for an Ohio State opponent in the last 20 odd years. And it was like their 3rd best offensive performance for Ohio State, and they couldn't win. So when you're scoring at a prolific level, but you still lose, that gives me concern about there being a ceiling, because you just have, at some point, you got to stop the other team a little bit more. And until this team shows that it can do that at a high level, and they got 2 great chances in Iowa and Illinois, that remains my biggest concern. Is just, we know the offense is elite. We know the offense is proficient. Can the defense just get enough stops to make that carry the day?
It's interesting. They've been so good this year. How much better would they be with Seth Towns being Harvard's 16 points, 8 rebounds? Seth Towns. What do we make of Seth Towns at this point? What can we expect from him over the next month?
I think probably about what we're seeing right now. It sort of seems like when you look at his production, he had a stretch there where he was playing maybe 15 odd minutes a game, and he was chipping in 9, 11 points or so. But it seems like maybe it started to add up a little bit, and I think he's feeling it. This is the most consistent basketball he's played, since he was a sophomore. He's a grad transfer at this point. I don't know that you can expect him like on a nightly basis to come out and give you, significant numbers or significant minutes. But I think they're happy with the production he's giving them. He's a threat. Teams have to prepare for him, and they have to be aware of him when he's on the court. I think we still need to sort of just expect that the Seth Towns that we all want to see is probably not going to be until next season. And that's okay. He's coming off some pretty significant injuries.
Okay, so if you are Chris Holtmann, what is keeping you awake tonight as you get ready for these last couple games? What is the biggest thing that needs fixed on this team?
I would say ability to protect the rim and just try to get a couple more stops. Like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of it comes down to that, just this team being able to be better defensively. And we're not talking like morph into, a Virginia type of defense. We're talking just 4 or 5 possessions a game where you're just a little bit better. I think if you can do that, then that just makes everything just click so much easier for you. And you just want to get healthy. I mean, there's been so many guys these last couple of weeks that have been banged up. And you look at that Michigan State game, Kyle Young doesn't play with a concussion. Musa Jallow missed the previous game with an ankle injury. He plays 32 minutes. That's not ideal. You don't want to have a guy coming off an injury have to jump into a role like that. So you want to get your guys healthy, and you want to find a way to get them just dialed in a little bit more defensively.
I'll get you out on this one. 1 year ago, we were getting ready for a Big Ten tournament that never happened. What do you remember about this time last year?
I remember there being some talk about whether there might be games without fans and how bizarre of a concept that sounded. And I remember looking ahead to going to Indianapolis and just thinking like, is this going to be a thing? Is this not going to be a thing? We had interviews like the day before what was supposed to be the Purdue game, and it felt weird talking about basketball because this weird virus that people were talking about was just bubbling up and becoming a bigger deal. I just remember like a growing feeling of, is this actually going to happen or not? And then being at a truck stop just over the Ohio State line when the Big Ten tournament was canceled, and driving there to Indianapolis anyway and doing some interviews. And my big goal was I wanted to buy a T-shirt. I wanted to get to the Big Ten tournament and buy a T-shirt because at that point I didn't think it was going to happen, and I wanted to have a souvenir from the tournament that didn't happen. And unfortunately, it was already closed before I could get there.
You can put it with all those Buffalo Bills Super Bowl T-shirts if you would have got your hands on one.
Yeah, and those Cleveland Browns Super Bowl championships too.
I wasn't going to go there, Adam. You had to go there.
I mean, I grew up a Cleveland fan. I can't help it.